So inshallah, the last two halaqas we went over what is Aqeedah, and then we talked about the biography of Imam Tahawi, rahimahullah, and his scholarship and this book Aqeedah Tahawiyah that he has left us with. And inshallah, for those who are new and you're listening for the first time to the live stream, St. Cloud Men's Halaqah, we've been doing it for 3 years, 4 years. What do you think, Cloud? And we were doing it originally in people's houses, just house to house, and those types of things. And then this Central Minnesota Islamic Center gave us some space that we can use indefinitely, inshallah. So we'll have to bounce around a permanent place now together. So inshallah. And we're doing this series on Aqeedah, and we're going to go over first Aqeedah Tahawiyah, just because it's basic, easy book. It's just bullet points. Goes over really the basic Aqeedah of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and it's got like ijma' or consensus. It's the most famous book of Aqeedah. It's the most agreed upon book of Aqeedah. It's taught everywhere in the Sunni world, from Saudi Arabia to Morocco, Mauritania, Syria, India, Malaysia, Indonesia, everywhere in the Sunni world, inshallah. And after that, we're going to go more in depth into the angels and jinn, the messages and messengers, what happens when you die, the barzakh, in the grave, Yawm al-Qiyamah. Then we're going to go over heaven and hell, Jannah and Nar. And inshallah, we're going to go over Qadr, predestination, the divine decree, etc. Inshallah. And so to begin, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. قال علامة حجة الإسلام أبو جعفر الورقي بمصر رحمه الله. So the scholar, the proof of Islam, Abu Ja'far al-Waraqi al-Tahawi from Egypt, Allah's mercy be upon him, said, هذا ذكر بيان عقيدة أهل السنة والجماعة. So this is a mention, this mention is a clarification of the creed or the beliefs. We went over Aqeedah the last time and the time before that about the clear meaning of it. So the Aqeedah of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And the term Ahl Sunnah, meaning the people of the tradition of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sunnah also means path. And Sunnah, we're commanded many times very clearly in the Quran to follow the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was inspired by so the things that he says, that he taught, come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if it was his personal opinion, he would say so. It's very clearly distinct between the two. And then we have the term wal jama'ah. Sunnah wal jama'ah. Jama'ah, it means the community. Like we have Jum'ah, which is Friday where we congregate. Jama'ah means to pile something together or to put something in a group. That's the root meaning of the word. And so Jama'ah, it means the community. And so there's many ahadith that talk about, that the ulama of the Ahl Sunnah, they will not make ijma' on something that's in error. They will not make consensus on something that's in error. And there's lots of hadith that say to stick with the community. And so they say Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. على مذهب فقهاء الملة. So on the way of the scholars of fiqh, or those who have understanding of the millah, and millah means like sect or denomination, in other words, Islam. Abi Hanifa Nu'man bin Thabit al-Kufi wa Abi Yusuf Ya'qubi bin Ibrahim al-Ansari wa Abi Abdullah Muhammad bin al-Hasan al-Shaybani. And so Abu Hanifa, he's one of the four Imams. Chronologically, he's the first of the four Imams. And you have Abu Yusuf and Muhammad Shaybani, who they were the two top students. They're two of many students of Abu Hanifa, but they're two of the top students in the Hanafi text. Sometimes they're called Sahibain or Shaykhain, and those types of things. They're very referenced to a lot, and their opinions are always referenced to. Most of the books from Abu Hanifa, they came narrated through Muhammad Shaybani or Abu Yusuf, like Kitab al-Athar or Fiqh al-Akbar and the likes. Fiqh al-Akbar. And we mentioned, earlier that Imam Tahawi, he was Shafi'i and raised Shafi'i. His uncle is Imam Muzani, who spread the Shafi'i madhab in Egypt. And later on, he became Hanafi, after seeing that his uncle consulted the Hanafi texts quite a lot whenever a new issue came up that was not in the Shafi'i text. Because we talked about before how the Hanafis, they were called as Ahlul Ra'i. They had a lot of these theoretical questions and issues that they worked on and decided on. Ridwanullah alayhim ajma'een. The pleasure of Allah on them altogether. وما يعتقدون من أصول الدين ويدينون به رب العالمين. So this is their beliefs about the theological foundations of the religion upon which they base their worship of the Lord of the worlds, which they base their deen. So قال إمام وبه قال إمامان مذكران رحمهم الله تعالى. نقول في توحيد الله معتقدين بتوفيق الله. So we assert about the unity of God as Imam Abu Hanifa and the two aforementioned Imams, Abu Yusuf and Muhammad al-Hasan, may God have mercy on them, believing with tawfiq. So tawfiq, I want to talk about this word a little bit, because for some new converts, it is a little bit, I think, ambiguous at first, and for those people who don't know Arabic, it can be a little bit ambiguous. But tawfiq basically means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you the opportunity and like the ability to do something. Let me pull up my notes here to make sure I don't forget things. So it refers to God's support in human actions and endeavors. And one of the major scholars, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, said tawfiq only comes from Allah, and He establishes it on the tongues of His awliya, the people of His deen, and those who have knowledge of His sharia, who only desire the truth. So the one who's given tawfiq, he's called muwaffaq. Muwaffaq, inshallah. And I'm not native Arabic speaker, so if there's native Arabic speaker who wants to correct me, please do. So the first point here, this Aqeedah is mainly because it's mainly for like the youth. who need the English language, and the youth who they grew up in this country, in this culture that's bombarding them with all of these ideas about atheism, science, believing in science as a religion, just about believing in Darwinism as a religion, and these different types of things. Because as far as I'm concerned, Darwinism is a religion. It's not really like just a scientific theory. Some people, they take it much, much further than that. But first I want to talk about the fitrah, inshallah. Does anybody here know what the fitrah is? You know the fitrah? Have you heard the word fitrah? What's the fitrah? Yeah, but just what do you think the fitrah is? Okay, inshallah. The Prophet said that, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, every child is born on the fitrah. Thereafter, the parents make him a Jew, Christian, or Zoroastrian. And for those who don't know Zoroastrianism, Zoroastrianism was a religion that existed in ancient Persia. In fact, technically it still exists. Still to this day in Iran, you still have people who follow Zoroastrianism. It's also called, in Arabic, they call it Majus, the fire worshippers, and those things you'll see a lot in the Islamic texts like that. You'll still find a lot of them, they believe in some sort of creator or one God. Even the Native Americans, they have the concept of the creator, that type of thing. And it's also a well-known and lengthy hadith is the hadith of Mithaq, or a covenant. And this is a hadith where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He took all of the future humans that were to exist out of the loins of Adam. So Adam could see all these future people that were going to exist. And He made them bear witness or testify, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. So, as human beings, we've already testified in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's the natural state that we're born on. And even nowadays, science has been able to confirm the fitrah, or at least give us some little insight into the fitrah, or maybe how it works. So there's a part of the brain, it's located right here, called the temporal lobe. That's why you have this is called temple, right? So this part here is called temporal lobe. And it's the center of the brain which is responsible for belief in God and religious experiences. Or, in the Islamic tradition, we might call it a hal or mushahida, like a state or a vision. That part of the brain is really the religious place for religious experience and spiritual experience and that type of thing. Some people falsely say that, if you have a seizure in that part of the brain, it makes you think you're like a god or you're a prophet, which in some cases might be true, but they falsely attribute this to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they'll attribute it to other prophets and religious figures and things, saying, that's where religion comes from. These people, they were just crazy and having seizures, But if you look at the biography of the Prophet upon him, you won't find any trace of any seizures, or you won't find any. But when I was a teenager, I started getting into heavy metal music and these types of things, and started getting into Marilyn Manson and those things. And I read his autobiography, and in it talked about atheism. And so, after doing more research on the history of the Bible, the history of the text, you have thousands right after the time of Jesus, peace be upon him. None of them match. They all contradict each other. Not a single two of them match each other perfectly. Well, which manuscript's the real manuscript? Well, who knows? Then you have all these different translations of all these different manuscripts. Which translation is the right translation? Some of them have thrown books completely out. You have the Ethiopian Bible, you have the Catholic Bible, you have Protestant Bibles, you have the Hebrew Bible. Which one's the real Bible? You have Greek translations, you have Latin translations, you have English based off those Greek and Latin ones. You have German translations. It goes on and on forever. I don't want to go too much off topic about that, but basically, long story short, I became atheist because I didn't believe that every concept of God that I had been taught made absolutely no sense to me. But there's a simple question, and we've talked about these questions in the first session. Right now we're on the third session. But there's a simple question: why is there something rather than nothing? It's pretty self-evident. I think it's obvious to anybody who observes the world and has a rational mind that everything has a cause. There's a cause and effect. If you have a row of dominoes and you flick the first domino, you're causing it to fall. And hit the other domino, hit the other domino, hit the other domino, and whatever. It's also self-evident and obvious that something can't come from nothing. Things just don't like self. In other words, there's a cause for everything. My laptop here that I'm using to try and live stream and I'll pop out of thin air. Didn't create itself. So there's a cause for it. The lights in the mansion didn't turn themselves on. Somebody actually went and flicked a switch. Lighting. Alhamdulillah. The real teacher came, so now he can teach the class, right?
Yeah.
You're the real teacher, so you can teach. I'll go sit down. It's to work. And before that, there's a power plant that's putting electricity to the wires of the light bulbs. Cause effect, cause effect. Okay. However, nowadays, even our brightest and scientific minds are saying that the Big Bang just happened out of thin air. There was no cause. No cause where something is known to be the cause of itself. Otherwise, it would be prior to itself, which is obviously absurd and impossible. You guys following me? You just raise your hand or something if I'm getting confusing or if you're not understanding. So everything in the universe has a cause. There cannot be an infinite regress of causes. There must be an uncaused first cause. Okay? That is God. And everything gets sucked in the black hole, bang, comes out the other end. My commanding opportunity. No. It's going back for infinity. Just like the now, here and now, it would never happen if it has to go back to infinity like that. Taught in high school, taught in university. These are the things that the kids are being bombarded with nowadays. And these are the things that are common in the culture, and many of the immigrant adults who come to this country, they're completely unaware of these things that are being taught to their kids in the school. Plus, of times in the Quran, to contemplate. And there's no fossil record showing a change of kind. Change of kind meaning like from a fish to a rabbit, or from a fish to a frog, or any of that type of stuff that they try to push on people. There's no fossil evidence for that at all. Okay? Just doesn't exist. So that's why they have the missing link. Okay? Missing pieces. There's nothing that can prove it. We just try to kind of dodge it, And one of those, or the most striking example, in my opinion, is the bacterial flagellum. You know what a flagella is? A flagellum? So a flagella is basically like a tail. It's kind of like a whip that's on a single-celled organism that propels it around. And I think most famously people know it because it's on sperm cells. You know, it's this little thing that propels it. And its most basic form of the flagella, it requires the most basic form that we've ever seen, anyways, or observed. It requires at least 40 proteins to function. Okay. Now, what's the building blocks of proteins? Does anybody know? Amino acids, exactly. And so we're talking about proteins, which are these huge, big, complex compounds. And then you go to a smaller, you have amino acids, which are still big, complex compounds. They're not atoms. We're talking about big compounds, like complex structures. You know? And it requires 40 different ones at least, okay, just to function. And if any one of these 40 proteins are missing or out of order, the flagella ceases to function. Meaning it has this floppy tail that just sits there and doesn't move and doesn't do anything, and is something the animal has to drag and is detrimental to its existence. And so it becomes dead weight to the animal, it becomes a burden to the animal, makes predators much more easy to catch it. The predators have easier time to eat it and catch it. So basically, its lifespan would be much, much shorter because it has no means of escape from predators. Okay. So how did this develop over generations through natural selection? If you have to have all these 40 pieces there at once, how did that evolve? Because it had to go through 40 steps or all these different mutations to get all these 40 proteins in that exact order without any of them missing. So all before that had to have something detrimental to its existence. But according to natural selection, that would be wiped out if it's detrimental to its existence. So how did that come about? They can't explain it. So the flagella can only have come as a whole piece. And there's many other natures like that in example, or many other examples in nature like that, which just bluntly defy the Darwinist theory. But they're easily swept under the carpet to preserve the religious dogma of Darwinism. The people that are not taught that in school. They're not taught another viewpoint in school. You guys following me? Is everything I'm saying making sense? Not too confusing? And so, when people base their whole entire worldview or their whole entire understanding off just science, and that's a problem. And basically what that's called is empiricism, where you're basing all your knowledge just off your five senses. And there's a huge problem with that, because everybody knows, like, obviously your five senses are fallible. People, they see things that aren't there, they hear things that aren't there, or they're really tired, so they miss something, or maybe they weren't paying attention to something, and whatever. Our senses are fallible, right? That makes sense. Furthermore, if you want to get a little bit more complicated, we each have different DNA. So our body is literally each unique, made up of different things. We have different genes that make up our body. So even the pathway that this information is coming to us, our five senses are different for each human being. So each human being has their own unique experience. How can you get to any objectivity through your senses? You can't. It's only subjective, because everybody has a different tool for accessing the outside world. So I'm saying that it's not an accurate method to get to truth. If you only are using your five senses, or that's your dominant way of accessing truth. Because science is all based on doing experiments and observation. You observe something, you collect data, and that's using your five senses. Even if you're using a microscope, you're still using your eye to see that. You can still see something that's not there potentially. Most people, they agree on that the senses are fallible. And then what's the philosophy of science, or what scientists use after that, once they do this experiment and they collect data, is they use what's called induction. And that's where they collect like some sort of data, like they have a sample group, they collect data on that group, and then they'll make generalizations based on them. So let's say this guy has a hypothesis that all birds are black. And so he goes and observes all the birds. And all the birds he sees, he observes 50 birds, and they're all black. And so he comes to his conclusion, all birds are black, which we know is completely false. But see what he's doing is he takes a small sample group, and maybe all the birds he saw were black, and then he generalizes it and says all birds are black. Because all the ones I observed were black, so they must all be black. Right, but even peer-reviewed, experiments, they can come out with ideas like that. Maybe all the peers that reviewed it also only saw black birds. This experiment was repeated and they only saw black birds because maybe in that area that's all they had was black birds. You see how this can be problematic? It doesn't give you an accurate representation of reality. So, I can assure you as a former atheist that once atheism is put under just the slightest amount of scrutiny, it all falls apart. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they did not witness the creation of the heavens and the earth, nor did they create themselves. Chapter 18, verse 51. So they're claiming all these things about creation, claiming these things that this single cell assembled itself and that there's this Big Bang or multiverse or all these things that they have no idea what they're talking about. It's all conjecture. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about, human nature in general, but also it's very pertinent to atheists. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in chapter 10, verse 22, until when you are in ships, and they sail with them with a good wind, and they are happy with it. Then comes a stormy wind, and the waves come to them from everywhere, and they think they are encircled within. Then they call on Allah sincerely, believing in His deen. If you deliver us from this, we shall truly be one of the grateful ones. This is an old example, people, when it comes to life and death, your life and death situation or near death experience, then you're going to call, oh Allah, save me, help me, even the atheists that'll come out of them. And a modern day example maybe is the airplane, where, if you're riding on an airplane, you get a little bit of turbulence, maybe the atheist, oh God, if you're there, please help me, please save me, or if the plane's going down, help me. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this situation in the Quran. Wa alaykum salam wa rahmatullah.
You can go downstairs. Yeah.
And so, this is like the fitrah that's kind of coming out from underneath the kufr. This belief. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about this word kufr, because this word kufr and fitrah, they're kind of like related. Okay. So the word kufr comes from the word kafara. Kafara is the root verb. And in the ancient Arabic, kafara means it's the action of like the farmer burying the seed or covering the seed up after he's planted the seed in the dirt, he covers it up. That's kafara. And so the word kufr, it has this meaning of like you're hiding the fitrah or you're covering the fitrah, you're hiding the truth, you're suppressing the truth, you're keeping it covered. In other words, like Islam, but you're like trying to suppress it or cover it up or deny it or hide it within yourself. You have the self-denial about it and those types of things. So for example, like somebody who's never heard about Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to give them a different test, after they die. And we'll talk more about that, later on in this course. But when you say like kuffar or kafir, that's someone who actively like knows about Islam and is rejecting it. Okay? And I hope that maybe giving the root meaning of that word will kind of help to clarify that. So going back to Imam Tahawi's original point, he says, "Inna Allah wahidun." So in the Arabic language, the word wahid is the numerical one. So you go, wahid, ithnain, thalatha, and so on. It's like the mathematical one. Um, it, and it also means, or if you say tawheed, like you use that form tawheed, it means to make one or to unify. Yeah, in other words, monotheism. So you have tawheed, another like Arabic word in the same form that you hear people say is tajweed. You know tajweed? Yeah, what's tajweed? It's making the Quran sound beautiful, reciting it in the right, correct way. And that comes from the root word jawwada. Jawwada means to beautify something or to make it nice. So you also have tajweed to make it beautiful. It's kind of the same verb form, if that makes sense. It's tawheed. And so monotheist in Arabic, we call a monotheist muwahid. That's the person who believes in Tawheed is Muwahid. And said by the ulama that the true Muwahid, he's the one that no matter if a good thing or bad thing, like happens to him, he has the same emotional state because he knows that both come from the same source. So both come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control of all the affairs. And therefore, that person is calm no matter which happens. Something bad happens to him, he's going to say Alhamdulillah. Something good happens to him, he's going to say Alhamdulillah. The ulama, they say that's the true muwahid. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. And ahad and wahid, they're related words, but ahad, it kind of has a slightly different meaning, and the meaning is that Allah is uniquely one. Like there's nothing that can compare to him. He's the only one, if that makes sense. And also when we say the word wahid in reference to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it kind of almost takes on the meaning of ahad. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unique. We'll get to that in the next point from Imam Tahawi. So, before I was Muslim and I was first, researching Islam, the concept of Tawheed, it really attracted me a lot. And it really, expelled the atheism out of me. Because like I said earlier, all of the concepts of God that I had heard before just did not seem probable to me at all. They just didn't make sense to me at all. And so when I was first trying to learn about Islam, I typed in "what's Islam" into Google. Of course, what comes up is Wikipedia. So I went on Wikipedia and I started reading about, Tawheed. That's the first, like pillar of Islam, the first thing that comes up. And I was immediately attracted to it. I was immediately impressed by it. I said, this makes logical sense. If a God were to exist, this is how he would exist. Like this is logical to me. And it really made sense to me. And I'm like, wow, this is truly something. And I was doing a lot of research, at the time about different religions. And one of the things that I noticed about every single religion is they all, they don't have Tawheed. Tawheed is unique to Islam. They all try to put like creation, into like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or deify some creation or, mix and match something, crazy like that. And I was reading the creation story of Hinduism, and if I'm wrong about any of these religions, and there's any believers of these religions listening here on the live stream, feel free to correct me. I could be totally wrong, but the research that I did was that the Hindu story of creation is where one of their gods, the god had split up into other gods, and one of them had a lotus that came out of the belly button, and that lotus became the creation, and God is in all creation. Which to me just kind of sounded a little bit weird and absurd. And I did research on Sikhism, and I think their ultimate goal is to unify or become one with God, and their soul, returning to God and becoming one with God. I was also told by a Jewish person that one of the reasons that they eat kosher food is to purify their soul, because they're hoping, or their desire, their goal is for their soul to reunite with God. And actually, it's a part of God. And so, in Christianity, obviously, they have the Trinity, and they make the deification of Isa alayhi salam. They try to say that, God was reincarnated in human form and these types of things. And, of course, the pagan religions, it's pretty blatantly obvious that they're building out of stones, or, sticks, or, whatever the case may be. In the case of Umar bin al-Khattab, he recalled one time, I think he made a idol out of dates in alcohol and mashed it together and prayed to it before he was Muslim. So, these things obviously is not Tawheed, and that's why Tawheed, in my opinion, is completely unique to Islam. There's no other religion that has the true Tawheed. It's the only way to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Imam Tahawi, he adds to Inna Allah wahidun la sharika lahu. And he does not have any partner. So, like I was saying earlier, in the ancient times before Islam, paganism was widespread. There was one Quranic verse which outlines the pagan gods that the Arabs used to believe in. So it says, somebody is Allah quoting somebody and said, "Never leave your gods, and never leave Wad or Suwa' or Yaghuth or Ya'uq and Nasr." That's in Surah An-Nuh, verse 23. And so the ancient times, these gods, even these ones that are specifically mentioned here in Quran, I did some research about this, and some of these gods, they were worshipped by the ancient Egyptians. They were worshipped by many ancient peoples. It wasn't only the Arabs. For instance, the ancient Somalis, before they had become Muslim, before they entered Islam, they used to worship a god called Wed. And the person who was the priest, or the religious person who was in charge of teaching about Wed, they used to call in the Somali language Wed Ed, or Wed Ad. It's like you might say in Somali language, Kulga Ed, go home. Wed Ed was the person he went to Ed, or he was the attendant to Wed. So that word, it became over time Weded. So nowadays in Somali language, you'll see people, they use the word Wedad, referring to someone who's a sheikh. But really this word Wedad, it has pagan origins. And therefore, in my personal opinion, I don't like the word. But, some people may use it, language changes over time and those things. But this word Wedad, it has pagan origins. And it's mentioned in the Quran, the god Wad. And the Somalis, they used to believe these gods too that the Arabs did. So it's not something that only the Arabs had, or that was unique to the Arabs. It was very widespread. And during the pre-Islamic times, during the time right before Prophet Muhammad was born, you had an atmosphere where basically the two world powers was the Byzantine Empire and the Sassanid Empire. The Sassanids, were the Persian Empire. And in Byzantine, the Trinitarian Christianity was the like state religion, and that's what they believed, and that's what was propagated by the state, by the government. And in the Sassanid Empire, you had Zoroastrianism that was the state religion. It was forced on a lot of people, and if you wanted any sort of political power of any sort, or any sort of prestige in these societies, you had to believe in these state religions. So these state religions started becoming much more widespread as these empires expanded, and those types of things. And so, as I talked about earlier with the Zoroastrianism, Salman bin Farsi, one of the Sahabis, he was raised in Persia as a Zoroastrian. as a fire worshiper. He used to be the attendant to the fire, the person who kept feeding the fire and keeping the fire alive. And later on, he converted to Christianity, and later on, he became Muslim. And so, when we put, the Trinity of Christianity or the dual gods in Zoroastrianism or the pagan gods to the test, we clearly will see their worldview fall apart. If you don't know the Zoroastrians, they believed in like two gods, a god of good and a god of evil, or a god of light and a god of darkness. And in Christianity, they had the Trinity, and pagans, they worshiped a multiplicity of gods. And so I want to give a basic example that kind of just makes shirk fall apart in all of this, forms. So let's say there's two gods, gods with a small g. There's two gods, and they want to move a rock. They both want, one wants to give the rock life, and the other one doesn't. One wants to move it, the other one doesn't, etc. So basically, we're going to have different scenarios that happen. Either the rock is moved by one of the gods, or like one of their wills is carried out, or neither of their wills is carried out, or the wills of both gods are carried out. And basically, how this would pan out is, let's say one of them is able to implement his will and move the rock, and the other one couldn't keep the rock staying. Well, then that one must be God, and the other one mustn't be God, right? Because he's able to use his will and exact his will on the rock, carry out his will. And if the rock, nothing happens to the rock, then neither of them can carry out their will. Therefore, neither of them are God. Okay? So, this whole thing will fall apart very, very quickly. And obviously, both of them are not able to carry out their will. If one wants to move it and one doesn't want to move it, they have equal wills, and none of them can carry it out, so neither of them must be God then. So when you try to look at shirk, whether it's the Christian Trinity where you have these three parts of the Trinity, well, what if one part of the Trinity wants to move this water bottle here, the other one wants to move it over here, and one wants it to stay? Then you're in a conundrum. You know what I mean? So you can obviously just quickly see like how fallacious these ideas are. Are you guys following me? Is it making sense what I'm saying? And Allah summarizes this point by saying, had there been within the heavens and the earth gods besides Allah, they would both have been ruined. So exalted is Allah, Lord of the throne, above what they describe. Chapter 21, verse 22. And it's very well known that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He doesn't forgive the shirk al-akbar, or the big shirk. Associating partners with Allah or worshipping other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the only sin that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not forgive. And then you also have what's called shirk al-asghar, which is the small shirk or the minor shirk. And that is, in English we call ostentation or riya. In a previous series for the St. Clement's Halaqah that we were doing before was diseases of the heart. And so we talk much more in depth about riya and those types of things. But basically the root of this disease of the heart is wanting something from other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The essence of riya is being occupied with people instead of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you're seeking to impress humans, to impress creations. And it's very pathetic activity, if you ask me. And it's an utter waste of your time and your life. And humanity is always in constant need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So why are we trying to get stuff from other people? And there are three signs or three indicators that you might have riya, and that is laziness is the first sign. The second is lack of action. for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when you're alone or out of the view of other people. And another sign is when you increase your good deeds when praised by others, but you decrease them in the absence of such praise. So those are three signs that you might have riyah. And it's better to do your good deeds in private and to conceal your sins. And showing off is always discovered, it's always humiliated, and it's always scorned. And my teacher, Sheikh Sam al-Nas, Hafidhullah, he said that Aqeedah is mostly learned from Surah Al-An'am and Surah Al-Ali Imran. So those two surahs, if you read them a lot, in your translations, or if you understand Arabic in Arabic, those ones they really talk a lot about the issue of Aqeedah and Iman. And Sheikh Samar, he also told me that this point here from Imam Tahawi, إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَاحِدٌ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ, the culmination of this point is the verse Ayatul Kursi. Anybody here have that ayah memorized? You know Ayatul Kursi? MashaAllah. So I'm going to give you the English translation. Allah, there is no deity except Him, the ever living, the sustainer of all existence. Neither drowsiness overtakes Him nor sleep. To Him belongs whatever is in the heavens and whatever is on the earth. Who is it that can intercede with Him except by His permission? He knows what is before Him and what will be after Him, and they encompass not a thing of His knowledge except for what He wills. His kursi extends over the heavens and the earth, and their preservation tires Him not. And He is the Most High, the Most Great. So when we think about this first point from Imam Tahawi, إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَاحِدٌ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ, we should think of Ayatul Kursi as its explanation, as the culmination of this point. So that's the end of this point. إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَاحِدٌ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ. Is there any questions about it? Anything you need to clarify further? Inshallah. So the next time, the next halaqah, next Friday, inshallah, 6 p.m., we're going to go over the next points. So one of the next point is لا شيء مثله ولا شيء مثله. Nothing is like him. And inshallah, we'll get through more points and more explanation. I want to get through this book, Aqeedah Tahawiyah. It's only, I think, like 123 points, 130 bullet points like that. This one I spent more time on because I thought, it's very important and very pertinent to, life here in the United States, life here in America, especially where in the high school a lot of kids are bombarded with a lot of these ideas, and we are a minority religion here in the United States. The dominant religions are Darwinism and Christianity and Judaism and those types of things. So I thought it was very important to clarify this point, much longer than the others, inshallah. I guess we'll end it for today. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.